Well, that was a very, very interesting discussion, and I'm sure we're all delighted to hear insights about so important events happening in the South Caucasus and how a shift is happening in this extremely important geopolitically region. So again, a great many thanks to our special guest, His Excellency the Foreign Minister, and thank you, Anya, for excellent moderation. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now have the opportunity to listen to remarks from the partner of the Warsaw Security Forum, a representative of Google, and it's my great pleasure to invite Ms. Heather Adkins, who's a Vice President of Security Engineering at Google, who will deliver her remarks now. Please, Heather, join us on stage.
Heather Adkins, and I'm Vice President of the Office of Cybersecurity Resilience at Google. I've been in cybersecurity for over 25 years, 22 of those at Google. And it has been both an honor and quite an exciting adventure over my long career. I wanted to open today's conversation on AI. We'll have a panel a little bit later. I wanted to open it a little bit by framing the challenges I've seen it over my career. We talk about the defender's dilemma. If you are in a cybersecurity defense job today, it feels like you have to be perfect all the time. Every device must be properly configured, all the software must be updated, and you must work quickly to find and defend against attackers. The attackers, however, have a much easier job. They only have to be right one time, as opposed to all the time. And this asymmetric nature of cybersecurity is what we call the defender's dilemma. And it is largely what we have been trying to solve for in cybersecurity for over 3 decades. I wanted to share a little bit today about this challenge. We'll talk about that, but I also wanted to share my optimism on some things that we are seeing go well and some things we are getting right. And the stakes couldn't be higher. The asymmetrical nature of cybersecurity is the reasons we have headlines like this. It's the reason we are seeing a 300% increase in attacks on NATO this year. It's the reason why ransomware syndicates are taking down hospitals and denying people life-saving care. And it's also the reason why here in Poland, and it's a great honor to be here in Warsaw talking about this topic. It's the reason why here in Poland we see over 1,000 attacks against Polish companies here, making Poland the single highest targeted nation in Europe. And that's extraordinary if we think about that. And in the last 6 months alone, we have seen that increase further 130%. Right? This challenge begins to seem extraordinary. And again, it's part of a much longer trend. But let me talk a little bit about why we are feeling so optimistic. And it comes down to really 2 things. The first is the notion of community. Nations all over the world, as I travel everywhere, have cybersecurity defenders. They have nations and governments that are increasingly aware of the problem. They have NGOs, journalists, citizens on the ground who are all deeply involved in trying to help. Some of the work we've been doing at Google, for example, here in Poland, are around elections. Poland had elections last year. And we were able to engage to train thousands of campaign workers, journalists, and government officials to protect themselves, to turn on our highest level of security we have for our products, and then to share threat intelligence about what we are seeing on the ground during the elections. You see here a graph. This is the number of denial of service attacks against Polish government websites, and you can see there's a big spike on the day of the election. One of the things we've been able to do is use our vast global infrastructure to help absorb these high traffic attacks so that government websites can stay online, so voters can find how to vote, where to vote, and how to engage in their democracy. And this kind of community participation and community outreach and collaboration is one of the reasons why I feel so positive and optimistic about the cybersecurity challenge today. But I also feel very positive because we now have a piece of technology that we've never had before: artificial intelligence. And this probably evokes both a positive response and a little bit of a fear response when you say it. I think a lot of people have mixed feelings. We've been using artificial intelligence for over a decade. This is not new technology. It's not just Google. But for example, if you are a Gmail user or you use Google Workspace, the enterprise version of our product, an AI model behind the scenes is automatically filtering 99.9% of all spam, phishing, and fraud attacks from your inbox, automatically protecting you every day. And you probably don't realize there's a sophisticated model behind that. Similarly, if you're on an Android phone, we scan 200 billion Android apps every day, looking for malicious apps that we can flag and then remove from devices. And again, this is happening automatically behind the scenes. And these are different kinds of artificial intelligence. They're not large language models that we're playing with today, but now we have this additional tool. And artificial intelligence in the hands of cyber defenders, we think, will actually turn the tide on the defender's dilemma and actually give defenders the kinds of tools that will help them analyze more data and move faster than we have ever been able to move before. And this will be a journey. We'll talk a little bit more on the panel about this. But it holds the promise to actually begin to reduce the amount of vulnerability in our systems so that threat actors cannot take advantage of us. Okay. That's why I'm optimistic. But I also want to acknowledge that with new technology comes challenges. And we understand that generative AI in particular can be used to create synthetic content. What you see here is a screen capture of a video from March of 2022. This was posted to Ukrainian websites. In this video, one would appear to see President Zelensky surrendering to Russia. This was not actually President Zelensky. This is a deepfake video. But it's the kind of thing that you can see might undermine faith not only in the administration of President Zelensky, but also in technology. Because if you can create this kind of dangerous content, why would we trust the technology that does so? And so one of the things that we realize we must absolutely do as an industry, and it's not just Google, it's in coalition with partners like Microsoft and OpenAI and others, is we must begin to use this technology in parallel to making sure that it can be trusted. And this means securing AI from the ground up. It means making sure that we can actually empower defenders by making sure they have as much access to AI as the threat actors do. And it means continuing the research on how to keep things safe over the long term. In June of 2023, we created this framework to help the broader community think about the kinds of things we have to do. Each one of these steps has a checklist of things we have to think about as we think about securing artificial intelligence for today and for the future. We call this our SAFE framework, our secure AI framework. But we also have to engage in industry coalitions together to create safer AI. So we've joined the Frontier Model Forum. So if you've heard of an AI company, they are probably part of this forum as they develop their foundational models. We are doing that with safety in mind as a coalition, even though we are competitors. And this is incredibly important so that everybody feels like they can trust the technology we're giving. We've also been working in the academic community to combat deep fakes. So for example, Synth ID is technology that it would allow you to identify a deep fake, allow us to label it so that if you see it online, you as the user, as the receiver of that information, can make an informed judgment as to whether or not you trust that content. And again, this is research that's happening in the open, and it's happening in collaboration. And finally, we are bringing together coalitions such as the Coalition for Secure AI to help businesses and organizations take the technology and incorporate it safely into their enterprise, so that if they are interested in using this, they know what it's going to take to be privacy preserving, safe in their environment, and also effective. And again, this isn't just Google, it is a coalition. So I want to wrap up here and we're going to switch to the panel, but let me just leave you again with my sense of optimism that even though there are challenges with new technology, as there has been with every new technology we have ever harnessed or invented, it comes also with the stark realization that we must be bold and responsible. And that is happening in coalition with tech partners and with governments all over the world. With that, just thank you so much for a few minutes of your time, and we're going to switch to the panel now. Give us a moment. Thank you.
Heather, thank you for this very insightful presentation. I learned a lot. So welcome everyone to our next panel discussion on the impact of AI on security and the economy. And I would like to welcome three distinguished experts who are on the forefront of AI innovation. And one of them is, again, Ms. Heather Adkins, Vice President of Security Engineering at Google. Bryce Goodman, Chief Strategist for AI and Machine Learning at U.S. Department of Defense's Defense Innovation Unit. And Piotr Sankowski, Research Group Leader at NCBR Ideas in Poland. Please have a seat. So my first question to all the panelists is, what do you see as the most significant security challenges posed by the integration of AI into critical systems? And how should governments and industries prepare for these challenges? Heather?
Well, I think I just spoke at quite some length about this. I do think that we are going to have to reason carefully about where we place AI and how much we trust it in certain applications. We think this human on the loop principle is very important for artificial intelligence, where we keep humans involved in the decision-making process. And I think by doing that, it really gives us a guiding principle for the next decade as we do this. Yeah.
Bryce?
I mean, I think all of the concerns that were, I would echo. My only, I guess the only place that I would maybe challenge is I think human in the loop is maybe not realistic in all cases, right? There are lots of cases where the whole reason we're introducing AI is because of the speed of decision making that needs to take place. So I think the question is, obviously setting the intent of an AI system must always be done by a human. But there is this question of in some cases we may be operating in a comms denied environment, and the entire point of relying on AI is that it is capable of making autonomous decisions. And then the question becomes, well, what kinds of decisions should we delegate, and what should we reserve, even if that has an impact on our tactical ability?
Yes. So I think so. In general, I have huge hopes that the introduction of AI to organizations will really extremely help them. So I think that I think that there are two challenges, and in a sense, I always think that AI. I mean, there is always a risk that AI is mimicking us, but in some cases it can be better because, when we talk about fairness, so we actually can define fairness for artificial intelligence systems, whether we don't really do this for people. So I think when we actually will be supported by AI in organizations and companies, then I hope that this will lead to more objective and more fair decisions.
Thank you. Bryce, I have a question for you. From a defense perspective, how is AI changing the landscape of national security? And are we adequately prepared for AI-driven threats like autonomous weapons or AI-powered cyber attacks? And what strategies are being developed within the U.S. Department of Defense to counter these threats? And if I may, one last question related to this. What types of solutions to these threats would you ideally like to see coming from the private sector?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen is a challenge to a global world order where 15 years ago, there were only a handful of countries in the world that were capable of carrying out precision strikes. And now anybody who has, $1,000 and access to some explosives can carry out a drone attack. And the result has been a totally asymmetric, at least from an economic point of view, response, right? I mean, there were cases of launching Patriot missiles, which cost millions against these multi-$100 drones. And obviously drones is not just AI. I would say it's also the introduction of dual-use technology onto the battlefield. And AI has been a huge part of that and will continue to be. But that's something that we in the DoD have been grappling with. And my organization, Defense Innovation Unit, exists to try to accelerate the adoption of dual-use technology into the DoD. And we were one of the first groups to, for example, recognize the both threat and capability that consumer drones offered, and now in Ukraine that's very evident. But I think there's this challenge to the status quo, and the cost of being able to acquire these incredible capabilities is in some cases been greatly diminished, and that has implications both for nation states but also for rogue actors, right? So. On the what are we doing? So we recently announced Replicator 2 initiative. So the first Replicator initiative has been looking at attritable weapon platforms. So instead of sending exquisite, tens of millions of dollars of platforms into areas, looking at much cheaper. And Replicator 2 is looking at countering UAS, so countering unmanned systems. And that's an area that I'm really glad to see that we're taking seriously as a department. We've been trying to work on that at DIU for a very long time through various vendors. But it's always going to be somewhat of a game of cat and mouse, of course.
Thank you so much. Heather, as someone leading security engineering at Google, how do you see the balance between AI-driven innovation and the need for security? And specifically, what role do large tech companies play in ensuring that AI systems remain secure and don't become tools for malicious actors?
Well, the first thing I want to start with is just a reality check of where we're at with AI today. We have AI models to do very specific things. So we've got AlphaGo, plays Go really well. We have models that do protein folding. That's a really specific model, not general purpose. And now we have generative AI, which feels a bit more like a general purpose artificial intelligence engine. And most of us are interacting today with generative AI via chatbot. So we've got Gemini, is the Google model. But actually the reality is that when fully adopted, when kind of fully matured, it's going to feel a bit more like a calculator, right? There are probably 100 calculators in this room. You've got one in your watch, your phone, probably the lights have an addition-subtraction module in the code. It's going to feel a little bit like that. AI will be a little part of everything in electronic components, whether it's optimizing the battery on your phone or optimizing the right lighting automatically. So that's really how most of us will experience this generation of artificial intelligence. And so when we think about the balance of security and building the technology, we both have to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves too much, but also putting in the guardrails. And so if you were going to have an automatic light adjustment system, you would probably put a very specific model for that. You wouldn't have a general purpose module, for example. So I think that's one consideration is, do Do you give it a fully featured, or do you give it a specific task? And then the second thing I think we have to carefully balance is how much access to artificial intelligence are threat actors going to have, and how much access are defenders going to have. And one thing we have to be quite careful of is regulating too soon or too hard in such a way that cyber defenders are restricted from use, but their adversaries are not. And that's going to be a lot of conversation with regulators, with governments, to make sure that we've got people enabled on the ground. But that's a polarity that we're going to have to navigate.
Thanks, Heather. That's a serious problem to have to tackle. So, Piotr, in Europe, particularly in Poland, how do you see AI influencing economic development, positively and negatively?
It's kind of challenging question today. I have huge hopes that things, actually that we in Poland started to understand how this topic is important and how, how actually that it costs as well. Yes, so actually one needs to invest in AI, and that it will give really a lot of benefits in long term. So I think really I'm really hopeful that we can see that kind of change coming, that there is a really lot of, actually public support for it right now. So I'm really hoping that we can excel. And there are several reasons for this. Yeah? So we do have extreme programmer talent here in Poland. Yeah, so something which, for example, is a case. So I'm not sure anybody heard of this ICPC, ICM-ICPC. So this is kind of ICM is the main IT organization in worldwide. Whether this competition is international collegiate programming competition, where actually teams of students compete with one another, solving programming tasks. And Warsaw University, for example, is the only university that took part in the finals in this competition starting from 1977. Yeah? So no other university in the world did this. Yes? So we really constantly deliver top quality talent in AI. And I think this will really in long term as well flourish and lead to really huge achievements in the systems here in Poland, because when people leave Poland, they succeed a lot. As you probably heard about OpenAI. So Kuba Pachocki is the chief scientist. So he's alumni of Warsaw, and he's actually one of the guys who took part in these competitions for many years.
That is impressive. Thanks for sharing the statistic with us and the history. So, speaking about talent, there is this fear that AI is going to replace a lot of jobs. So what do you think the role of governments should be to try to ensure that there are not significant economic disruptions when this starts to happen? Heather, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I think there is a conception as people think about, automation will replace that job. What we are actually seeing and extrapolating out of the current trend is that the jobs will change, not eliminate. And when I look at just my own field, cyber defenders, especially if you're early career talent, about 30 to 40% of your job is toil, because we've not had good tools. That will shrink, and there'll be more time actually for people to do more interesting parts of the job, but also more valuable parts of the job. And we think that that is probably true across many sectors. A good example is when automatic teller machines were invented. People had thought that perhaps if you worked in a bank, you would no longer have a job. But actually what we found is that the jobs inside the bank changed. Instead of just counting money, you became an advisor on how to invest your money. So for example. And because of that, I think one thing governments can really focus on is skills building. Everywhere I go, I get one question: how do we train our teachers to teach children about the next generation of technology? How do we help workers reskill for the way that their job will change, whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, cybersecurity. Everyone who will start to use this technology has to go back to school. We all went back to school about 18 months ago when generative AI came on board. And so I think education policy, training, and talent policy is something that governments can focus on.
That's a great, very positive view and paints a very important role for the government. Thank you. Bryce, what's your take on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I think the challenge is the speed at which AI is progressing as compared to earlier technologies, right? And so I agree that over a long enough period, history shows that we tend to get towards some kind of an equilibrium. That doesn't mean that things like wealth concentration and inequity don't increase, but at least from an employment standpoint, we tend to reach an equilibrium. But along the way, there can be dislocations, right? And so, if you look at the history of electricity, it took about 100 years between the introduction of large-scale electric generation to actually electrifying the majority of manufacturing. Or if you look at, telephone switching, you're talking about a decade, right? And in this case, AI technologies, we're talking about things that, I don't know, in my experience, I would have thought would take years happening in months. I think the other thing that's interesting is a lot of people would have predicted that it would be kind of blue-collar jobs that were going to be automated away via, robotics. There's this idea that, surely like lifting a crate doesn't require that much intelligence, so we can just get a machine to do it. Turns out that that's actually way harder, and that it might be a bunch of white-collar jobs, things like, tax accounting, for example, that got automated. So I think that also shows just the unpredictability, which is inherent to any technology that's growing at the rate that AI is.
Thanks, Bryce. Piotr, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. So I will be repeating hope many times today. I hope 5 times. For some reason. But I hope that we indeed will be able to do more with AI. So I think it's kind of the picture is way bigger. I mean, the story of development of technology have been, as you said. I mean, it always have been happening that we did not lose the jobs by introducing electricity, steam power, I don't know, petrol engine whatsoever. But and something is important. I mean, we are not kind of ashamed to go by car now instead of going by a horse, because we are kind of can travel faster. I mean, similarly, we are not ashamed to use a bulldozer instead of a shovel because we can do much more work. I mean, this will again happen with AI, and I mean, we will be able to do more things using artificial intelligence, as well with respect to kind of boring operations. Maybe even not boring, but challenging tasks. I mean, essentially, this will give us it will become a tool that will be able to solve many interesting problems. I mean, essentially do much more work, intellectual work that we were able to do. And I don't think we should be ashamed of it. I mean, we should be kind of proud that we created such tools to actually help us with our work.
Thanks, Piotr.
I have a really interesting example of that. We now have a model that can do extrapolation of protein folding. So if you are doing pharmaceutical research, one of the most challenging things is to understand how the pharmaceutical chemical will interact with the bacteria, the viruses, or whatever we're targeting, a cancer cell. And that part of the research in the pharmaceutical community might be 5 years, 10 years. We have now extrapolated every possible protein folding combination, and that is in a database. So today, if you are doing pharmaceutical research, that kind of information is now readily available to you, which means we've cut down, something that from an intellectual perspective would have taken a very, very long time to a short amount of time, but it wasn't the important step in the outcome. The important step in the outcome is the development of the therapeutic, the testing, and the rollout, right? So that's just an example of where we might shorten some of the lifetime of things, but not impact jobs. In fact, we might create and enable more scientists to creating better therapeutics over time.
That's impressive. Thanks for sharing this. How do you, I wonder, and that's a question for all the three of you, how do you deal with the data privacy challenge? As we're building these models, we are enthusiastic about the progress that we're making, and we're using vast amounts of data. But the challenge of privacy concerns has been raised on multiple occasions. How do you deal with that in your respective areas?
I feel like I'm the one who's supposed to answer this one.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll give it a start. I'm going to be interested to hear from my fellow panelists. I think it's important to remember we're not starting from zero. There are strong privacy principles everywhere in the world already marked down in legislation. So in the EU, I have GDPR. In the United States, we have a kaleidoscope of frameworks for thinking about privacy. So we're not starting from the beginning. Secondly, it's not just privacy. We also have to be respectful of copyrighted content and other kinds of content that might be used to train data. It might be used as an input to a model to get output. And so we have to think end-to-end about the way that software is built and put the privacy principles in each step. Also looking at the regulatory frameworks that govern that. And so, for example, one of the things the Coalition for Secure AI is doing, this is a coalition with Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, Facebook, etc., is to help companies understand how to safely use artificial intelligence. And one of the first playbooks they want to issue is, how do I make sure that my use of the model is privacy preserving in the context I'm using it? So let's say you've incorporated it into a customer support function and your customer's interacting with a chat bot. And I think we're all probably using some version of this now on websites. How does the company make sure that when the customer types in information that is not stored in a way that's a violation of the privacy policy or the law, and also that the customer knows and has transparency around that, right? So I think the foundations for privacy that we have today are very strong and important, and then we build that into new technology. And indeed, that's the intent of these frameworks around the world.
Thanks, Heather. This is reassuring to hear. Bryce?
Okay, so I'm going to take off my DoD hat and put on my philosophy student hat.
Go for it.
And say, so I think one of the challenges that privacy has never really been a super well-defined concept, right? It's always been a reactive concept. We don't have privacy in law until the invention of the photograph in the 19th century. And when you talk about AI and privacy, AI systems are not interested in knowing what I'm doing. They're interested in knowing what I'm doing insofar as I'm representative of a larger group, right? We're looking at aggregate level trends. So this becomes really complicated when you apply things like the GDPR. And we've seen this challenge in biobanks, for example, which are there to collect a lot of genetic information. And the whole point is to allow researchers easy access to these large genetic databases so that they can try to identify genetic traits and predispositions. But that goes up against this principle of informed consent, which says that every time we access somebody's data, we need to obtain informed consent. Well, the only way we could do that is if we continue to keep their data labeled, right? So you have these bizarre paradoxes that emerge when we try to protect privacy. And my personal belief is because we don't totally have a coherent view of what privacy is. And I think machine learning just sort of brings that to the fore.
Do you have a solution for us?
I don't have a quick and easy solution. I mean, there's a philosopher named Helen Nussbaum who writes about contextual integrity, which I think is a really interesting idea that says instead of calling information, private in a categorical sense, we instead always need to look at the context in which it's being used. And I like her because her work has actually been adapted into certain features in tech tools, right? So it's not just totally, white papers that never go anywhere.
Interesting. Thank you. Piotr, I have a different question for you. What types of AI technologies in Poland are you most excited about?
There are some of them. I think something which is happening right now. I mean, we should remember that in order to introduce some technology, we need to have the related industry present and to be very strong and already innovative. And one of these industries which is in Poland and is very kind of innovative is the gaming industry or computer graphics. Yeah, so I think that here we really have a huge potential to actually build up on kind of maybe interdisciplinary teams that will work on using AI in computer graphics. And other things which we certainly should do are related to agriculture and forestry. I mean, this is really, if you have been traveling around Poland, then you will see we'll have a lot of fields and a lot of trees. So we should really try to use AI to actually, manage this these things better, because it's really kind of a huge part of like our country.
Thank you, Piotr. So my last question is for all the panelists, and then we'll open it up for a few questions from the audience. Looking ahead in the next 10 to 15 years, or maybe 5 to 10, let's say 5 to 10, because AI is rapidly evolving. What do you see as the key trends in AI that will have the greatest impact on global security and the economy? And you can each pick your favorite examples. Who would like to start?
I can start. So I think it will happen now, maybe 5 to 10 years. It's indeed, but some changes will happen again earlier. So it's indeed kind of. I mean, so there are some kind of measurements. I did not try to reproduce them, but kind of people are testing the intelligence of these large language models using the Mensa test. And actually, right now, the latest model achieved 120 IQ. So it's super surprising, because this improvement from, say, 80 to 90 IQ did happen in around 1 to 2 years. Yeah, so we can think of it as that the AI graduated from maybe from university already. So I mean, we should, like, the next progress will actually happen super fast. So again, cannot reproduce this test, so we'll see. But it's really, I think, surprising that, or maybe better word, I hope that these tools will actually be used to generate new types of innovation. Yeah, so we should think of AI as a tool to actually try to do more things as well in innovation and technology, like to develop new materials, develop new types of medicines, and use it in medicine. And this will even like combinations like, I don't know, psychiatry and using AI for really mental health issues. I think this will really come, and it will come soon. And I mean, not even mentioning, of course, education and personalized education.
Thanks, Piotr. Bryce?
Yeah, I won't even try to attempt to do 5 or 10 years. I think in the military, what's I think going to be very interesting is seeing AI move out of, or not move out of, but attention shift from what I think are relatively straightforward applications like computer vision and predictive maintenance, and towards far more consequential but in some ways ambiguous tasks like strategic planning, for example, operational planning, where you have this incredibly lengthy process that right now is very rigid and is very much a waterfall process. Having AI, that's where I think you would be able to say we actually have intelligence on tap. And then in the immediate future, I think agentic systems, so AI that doesn't just provide an answer but is able to carry out an action on our behalf. I think I see that radically changing many aspects of society. And then finally, sort of longer term, geopolitically, I think the question of if AI is going to become commoditized in the way that people seem to think it is, then that suggests that electricity once again becomes the precious resource and cheap access to electricity. And what does that mean in terms of distribution of data centers? What does that mean in terms of energy policy and climate change and all of these sort of knock-on effects?
Would you envision removing or minimizing the role of the human in the loop in case of those strategic operational planning decisions for speed purposes. What's your position on that?
So I think we have a pretty clear, legal and ethical basis for ensuring that, what we call commander's intent is always involved. That being said, when you look at, trying to operate in, communications denied environments, the entire point of autonomy in that situation is a system being able to take action on its own. And so I actually think that the human in the loop becomes a really dangerous misnomer and actually could make a system, either defeat the point of it or make it way less safe. And I think we should actually confront the real possibility that there are certain conflict scenarios in which we don't want a human in the loop. And then what does that mean in terms of the ethical boundaries that we build into that system?
Thank you. Heather?
Yeah, let me just kind of first begin by reflecting on the fact that we have no idea what 10 years out looks like. And that's true of every technology we've ever invented or harnessed. I remember a paper I read about when electricity was harnessed, and people thought warfare would change because suddenly we would have weapons where we zap people on the field. This is like the late 1800s. And actually, that is not how it changed warfare. It changed warfare by improving supply chains. Right? And so our first hypothesis about how we use technology is never actually how we end up harnessing it for kind of real effectiveness. So that's number one. Number two, I think we are going to have massive improvements in pharmaceuticals, material science. We're already using it to help optimize power grids. Google's got a partnership with many governments to do flood prediction. Big topic here in Poland at the moment. These things will dramatically improve the lives of people. And also, we will get to learn more about the technology over the next 10 years. I'm going to disagree with my colleague and say societies will learn they want a human in the loop on some things. And yes, you may have some micro decisions along the way, but for strategic, kind of irreversible things, we will have humans in the loop. That will become a norm, in my view. And then finally, and the thing that we never talk about is, how is AI going to change us? And I already see it to some extent in the classroom. I talk to professors. Professors are going back to oral exams. Does the student really know what they're learning? In the Bay Area, California, USA, where I live, there are now whole groups of people so that you can make friends. We've spent so much of our time electronics in our lives and trying to automate our lives. Actually, people want the human connection back. And I think that may change. But I do think we're going to get 50 years, 2050, not 50 years from now, but in 2050, I think we will have increasingly autonomous computing systems, self-healing systems, self-defending systems. But I don't think we're going to let the computers make many more strategic decisions than that.
Thank you so much, Heather. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we won't have time to pose questions from the audience, but we'll have another panel in the afternoon, so please join us back for that on AI. You can ask your questions then. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.